Morning, my name is Aarya Sontakke and today I will be making 5 topic presentations. My first speech is an after dinner speech being delivered to a team of 10 soccer players, a coach and sponsors at a sponsored dinner after having won the football league. The audience is aged between 18 years and 50 years. Hey boys, quiet down for a minute. Now that you are done giving us something to say here, calm down. I can see you all are very excited here. This is probably the first time we have all smiled in 8 months. I want to start off with congratulating all of you for your performance out in the field today. You boys did extremely well. You had an arduous responsibility of carrying the pride of our nation on your shoulders. And as a team captain, I want to say you couldn't have made me or our country any prouder. The country will make the trophy their national pride, but never forget, trophies carry dust. These are memories which last forever. To see where we started, a retired footballer being a coach for the very first time, and 11 state level players right out of college or high school with no association, no coordination, and a substandard understanding of the game. I would have scoffed at anyone if they were to say that we would be winning the cup today. We were the underdogs, it was unmistakable. Although we won, the matches were no walk in the park. We lost a few, can't win every battle, or can we? However, even in that minute, insignificant loss, I could see disappointment in all of your eyes. And that has what allowed us to get the victory at the end of the day. Difficulty in accepting defeat, striving to do better, and not giving up. We all remember the time Manuel was benched, don't we? When he sprained his ankle. The dynamic of the game changed completely out on the field. However, we were there for him as a team, we played as a team, and eventually we won as a team. Look to your left and right. The faces you see are the ones you can rely on. When you are down by however many goals at halftime and you barely have any time to catch up. The faith and the trust which we have in each other, that has what allowed us to get the cup at the end of the day. However, it wasn't always this way, was it? We had frequent altercations. I remember for the first one, Richard and Jared were at each other's throats constantly. I had broken up way too many fights between them, and coach had come to a point where he was going to kick both of them from the team. But now look at them. They arguably have the best chemistry out of all of us. To be fair, the transformation for everyone has been incredible, hasn't it? The placement of our shots, coordinating well together, it is like an elaborate orchestra which we have perfected with incessant practice. From 6 a.m. in the morning to 7 p.m. in the evening, we have bled, we have sweat, and we have cried on the ground when we have now made our mark. I see I've painted a very good picture of our preparation for the competition. However, we did have our fun as well, didn't we? I think we all remember the time we all went trekking and Chris fell into the pond and he shrieked so loudly because he felt something touch his feet. Or how about the time we all snuck out early after practice and we thought that coach wouldn't realize that we were all absent for an entire day. That was quite silly, wasn't it? But these are the moments that have allowed us to form a brethren over 8 months. And that is a victory by itself if you would have won the cup or not. Now as this ride comes to an end, I just want to say, eat as much as you want and sleep long hours for the next month. Because we will return to the same field at the same time to start training all over again. Thank you and have a wonderful evening. My second speech is introducing and thanking a guest speaker at an entrepreneurship summit with 1,000 people in attendance ranging between the ages of 20 years and 35 years. Good evening, everybody. I am sure you all have had a very long day, mostly filled with heavy discussions, which might have only all down a bit. However, we have a bit of a surprise for you today, and one you will enjoy paying attention to. Born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, his first taste of business was at the age of 10, when he sold garbage bags to buy expensive basketball shoes. And now, he owns a basketball team of his own, the Dallas Mavericks. Eventually, he went on to Indiana University, where he got a bachelor's degree in business administration. In his early 20s, he experienced a divine dissatisfaction. He was working at a tech company the first day and writing his own newsletter the very next. He knew he was destined for more. So, with his friend Todd Wagner, he started his own company called Audionet, which he sold for a whopping $6 billion to Yahoo. However, his most notable achievement, and the most people recognize him from, is the hit television show Shark Tank, where he is one of the many affluent investors on the panel. He is known for his interest in startups. He has written innumerable books highlighting strategies and the importance of having your own business. He has also invested in over 100 startups during his tenure as an angel investor. We all know the saying when we say he or she is meant for a particular profession. And looking at his background and history, it is evident that he was always meant to be a businessman. He has said it himself, business is coded into my genes. I was always meant to do this. So, at the age of 62, with a net worth of $4.3 billion and with one of the most inspiring and successful success stories on the planet, please put your hands together for the one and only Mark Cuban, everybody. That was truly a phenomenal speech, Mr. Cuban. I really thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and addressing all of us here today this evening. I would say a lot of invaluable information was shared with us here today this evening because it comes from first-hand experience, and we wouldn't find this in any other textbook or article. I would like to take this moment to summarize what Mr. Cuban has shared with us here today this evening. Beneath all the technical jargon and complex commerce, Mr. Cuban has revealed to us that the success of a business is dependent on very elementary factors. Being nice, working hard, and never stop learning. It makes sense, doesn't it? You need to be nice to your employees to boost morale and subsequently boost productivity. And you need to be nice to your clients to boost sales. Moreover, I think the essential point to be made was working hard, being passionate, and outworking everyone. He said it himself, if a student do not work hard, he will get them away for scientific experimentation. Moreover, he also said that never stop learning and never stop being a student. There is never a point in your life that the world will stop growing around you, so you need to be on par. And if you are not, it will become very difficult to attain success the way Mr. Cuban had in his early years. I think Mr. Cuban has covered these points way better than I ever could have. So once again, I would like to thank you for taking time out of your schedule and addressing all of us here today this evening. We have heard more today in 20 minutes than we would otherwise. So thank you, and I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. My third speech is a narration of a story at a library book club with 30 people in attendance between the ages of 15 years and 18 years. Good afternoon, everybody. Before I begin, I would like to thank the members of this book club for providing me with this opportunity to talk about my favorite short story, which is The Bet by Anton Chekhov and belongs to this collection of short stories in my hand right here. I'll begin now. In late 1800s in Russia, there was a very prosperous banker who was hosting a dinner party for his friends belonging to the upper class. Now, amongst these friends was a very young and aspiring lawyer, and they were having a heated discussion about which is better, capital punishment or life imprisonment. The lawyer was of the opinion that life imprisonment is better, because at the end of the day, you are still alive. However, the banker was of the opinion that if you're going to be spending the rest of your life in isolation, you might as well be dead. Now, they went back and forth for a while, and they realized that the only way they could settle this argument was with a bet. The banker proposition that the lawyer lives on his estate for a period of 15 years in complete isolation, secluded from everyone else in a small cottage, where he would be provided with everything. And in return, he would receive 2 million rubles. Now, this was a very promising offer for the young lawyer, because 2 million rubles was a lot of money at the time, and more than enough compensation for the 15 years he would spend on the banker's estate. So, the very next day, he made his way over to the cottage and started living there. And for the first couple of weeks, it was absolute bliss. He could sleep when he wanted, he could eat when he wanted, and no one was stopping him from doing anything at all. However, depression and loneliness eventually got to him. However, he kept himself engaged by reading new books, learning new languages, and playing the piano excessively. And over the 15 years, he realized that he was more learned and more wise than anyone else his age. He had reached a point of self-actualization where he didn't care about money anymore, and that is when he was going to forfeit the bet. And this is exactly what he explained to the banker in a note which he would write one day before the bet was supposed to end. Now, simultaneously, the banker was pacing very anxiously around his room, because over the 15 years, his calculated risks had become gambles, and his millions reduced to pocket change. And he realized that if the lawyer would win the bet, and if he provided him with the 2 million rubles, he would be financially ruined. And the only way he could salvage himself would be by killing his best friend. Although his guilty conscience was weighing on him, he made his way over to the cottage, completely prepared to kill his only friend. And before he was about to strangle his friend, he saw the note on the desk. And when he picked it up and he started reading, a wave of relief just washed over him, because he realized that he couldn't even kill his friend anymore. So he made his way back to his quarters, and he slept so uneasily, because he felt so guilty about what he was going to do. The very next day, when they opened the cottage, they saw that the cottage window was ajar and the lawyer was missing. They realized that he had forfeited the bet and the banker had won. Now, on a first glance, it might seem that the banker has won, clearly because the lawyer has forfeited the bet, hasn't he? But let's delve a little deeper and try to understand who came out the better man through this entire process, the lawyer or the banker, and who had gained more. I have left a lot of details out of my narration so that I can encourage you to pick up the book yourself. It is on sale in the book exhibition next door. Please feel free to check it out yourself. Thank you and have a great afternoon. My fourth speech is a farewell speech being delivered in a college auditorium with 150 21-year-olds in attendance. Hello everyone. Can I please have your attention for a moment? Hello. Thank you. As most of you all know, I am Aarya Sontakke, and I just want to take this opportunity to reflect on the junior year. This was arguably a fun year, wasn't it? We made new friends and we made a lot of memories. Unfortunately, we need to say goodbye to two precious gems who have been with us for more than 5 years. This speech is dedicated to them. Diligent, dedicated, and considerate. These are words nobody at Evans International School will use to describe Aarya Sontakke. What has this guy not done? Captain of the football team, head of the student council, and he flung the physics midterm because he forgot he took the subject. Jokes aside, Adit is one of my closest friends and someone I once knew your brother. I think I speak for everyone when I say won the state championship for the first time in 20 years under the leadership and guidance of this man sitting right here. Even beyond the field, his work in the student council has been stellar as well. He introduced the very first student newspaper, which only started with him, me, and 3 other people. And now we have over 20 volunteers who write for it. Most of us here have seen Alan grow from a scrawny 18-year-old who didn't care about school to a bulky 21-year-old who still doesn't care about school, and knowing that we probably never will. Over 3 years, I have made numerous memories with him. From winning the state championship to tone deaf karaoke and sleepovers, he has been by my side all the way. And those are the times I and many will remember. When he goes to Europe to play for a football club he has dreamt of playing for since he was 10 years old. Now that his greatest aspiration is realized, I couldn't be more happier or prouder of him. You have left an unparalleled legacy behind and a mark in all of us. Saying goodbye will be difficult, but it is necessary. Thank you, Alan, for being with us here today. Now, to talk about our second key party, Joshua Curtin. Yeah, I expected that response. It is undeniable that most of us barely approach Joshua except for the occasional name calling, which I have been guilty of as well, and I sincerely apologize for that. However, one evening before a math midterm when I awkwardly approached him for help, what was supposed to be a 15-minute revision ended up being a 2-hour-long call, where I learned a lot about Joshua and how alike we were. When I was listing his accomplishments for this speech today, I realized that barely anyone besides his family and close friends are even aware of what he has accomplished. So for those who don't know, Joshua is an academic scholar, notably so in the field of business administration. His passion made him go so far as to attending entrepreneurial seminars online for over 6 months. His parents and I were incredibly worried that he was spending too much time on a futile endeavor. However, after months of developing connections, Joshua got a phone call saying his assistance was needed in co-founding a startup in sunny California. Can you guys believe that? I mean, I don't think anyone our age can say that they have achieved something of that magnitude or are even capable of doing so. So Joshua, here's wishing you every success that you rightfully deserve. As this night comes to a close, I just want to say thank you, Alan and Joshua, for being with us here today this evening. You have made the college journeys of everyone here more memorable and a little more bearable. I hope you remember these times when you are in either folks who are 30 millionaires under 30 or on national television receiving one of the most prestigious trophies in sports. Thank you, and I wish you a wonderful life ahead. My fifth and final speech is a persuasive. My fifth and final speech is a persuasive speech being delivered at an inter-college debate with 300 people in attendance ranging between the ages of 15 years and 40 years. And then the dentist assistant approached me and asked for my medical file. She was explaining to me the procedure which I would undergo until she was interrupted by an assertive doctor who snatched the file out of her hand. She became submissive, almost as if she were afraid of him. I understandably felt uncomfortable, seeing her having whatever quarrel they were, in public might I add. It was evident that it had to do with rank. Which was surprising because the dentist assistant had been with him for more than 4 years. However, I had seen the individual she was with for the very first time. When I queried about him, it turned out that he was the dentist's son, who was likely practicing almost immediately out of medical school. This seemed unfair to me, but I wasn't surprised, nor was I against it. I mean, I would expect a father to want However, simultaneously, you are taking away an opportunity from someone more experienced and deserving. The term nepotism is usually referred to Catholic bishops who would bequeath wealth, property, and priesthood onto their nephews who were usually the illegitimate offspring. This served as a way for such clergy to both retain power and wealth within their families. Nowadays, nepotism is used to refer to the hiring or promotion of family members, and it smacks of favoritism. In most corporations, nepotism is forbidden by company policy. However, in family-owned businesses, this is often viewed as natural and expected. For years now, Bollywood has been dominated by those who come from within. Many talented youngsters barely stand a fair chance against most star kids because they lack the tag of being some famous celebrities, relatives, or children. It is obvious that someone needs to polish them out. Don't you feel there is a need to raise our voices against this toxic culture? Even when our political parties, the integral organs of policy-making mechanisms, are also integral participants in this toxic culture. Indian politics has seen the most of nepotism in its history, despite ours being a democratic country. Right from Motilal Nehru to Rahul Gandhi, India has been ruled by a dynasty which still tries to perpetuate its rule. In Maharashtra, the Thakres have maintained a dominant position right from Balasaheb Thakre to Uddhav Thakre, and now this was the Raj Thakre. Indian politicians strive to do their best right before elections. They often state that they won on the basis of merit, but this way is too thin to not be seen here. Like most major changes in this country, this also has to become an issue which is strongly raised by all. If this political nepotism goes on any longer, corruption in this country could rise once again, like it had in the past decade. It is only when we have smart and talented politicians in power will our country be risen to new heights. I personally believe that nepotism is an incredibly unfair practice. The only way anyone should progress in roles or should be awarded something should be strictly and only based on merit, regardless of their associations with people. When talking about companies, we need to understand that the victims of nepotism aren't limited to one or two people. All employees within the organization are equally affected. In conclusion, I just want to say that nepotism is an incredibly unethical practice. And with the evidence provided, I can confidently state it is an immoral practice. A practice that definitely needs to be eradicated. Thank you. Now I'll be moving on to the reflection task. The first phase of the reflection task is the performance program. Was the starting point. So when I first started writing the speeches from ATCL, I wanted to choose the prompt which was the least specific and had the most room open for interpretation. So that's why I chose the persuasive speech, because I realized that I can talk about potentially any social or political issue on hand, and this was a very easy one to settle on as well, because at the time nepotism was an issue which was heavily discussed in media outlets and news networks, so that's why I decided to write that speech first. When talking about the introducing and thanking a guest speaker speech, I wanted to think about people who have inspired me personally and have acted as mentors in my life. So the person who immediately came to my mind was Mark Cuban, and I structured the entire speech around him. For my story narration speech, I realized that I would need a short story to structure my speech around. So I did a lot of research and I read a lot of short stories over a period of 2 weeks, and eventually I settled on The Bed by Anton Chekhov because of the moral the story had. The speeches I wrote at the very end were my after-dinner speech and my farewell speech, because I had never tackled these speeches before, and I realized that I wouldn't be able to write them properly unless I did some research beforehand. So when I started writing these speeches, I went through numerous after-dinner speeches and farewell speeches online to really understand how I should replicate the tone, mood, and structure, and so that I could really gain some insight into how I'm supposed to write my speech. More than any external influences, either artistically or in the social context, I would say from a persuasive speech, there was a lot of heavy social influence, because I started writing this speech in the middle of 2020, which was around the time the late actor Sushant Rajput passed away, and his connection and the connection of his suicide to nepotism in the Bollywood industry was discussed heavily by media outlets and news networks, as I mentioned before. And I would say that really influenced my decision in choosing nepotism as a point of discussion for my persuasive speech. For the introduction and thanking a guest speaker, there wasn't any external influence per se. Same goes for my short story narration, there wasn't any external influence. However, for my after dinner speech and farewell speech, I derived a lot of inspiration from the speeches delivered by a late night talk show host and comedian called Colin O'Brien. I went through his commencement speeches which he delivered at popular universities such as Dartmouth and Harvard, and I tried to replicate a similar style where I had a good balance between sentiment and humor, and that is what I tried to replicate in my speeches as well. How did I plan my speeches? Now, for my persuasive speech, I wanted to make sure I didn't give away the topic of discussion immediately. So what I decided to do was I would start with a personal anecdote, and that was something I realized people would relate to and would act as a good segue to talk about nepotism. For my introduction and thanking a guest speaker speech, I realized that I didn't want to give away the identity of the guest speaker at the very beginning, and as you might have noticed, I gave away the name at the very end of my thanking portion. So what I decided to do was I would list the accolades and accomplishments of this particular person and also his background and history so that people would keep on guessing and try to understand who this guest speaker could potentially be. For the thanking portion, I realized that I didn't have enough matter to thank someone for 2.5 minutes. So what I decided to do for this portion was that I would just summarize and reiterate what the guest speaker would have talked about during the speech. For my after dinner speech, I wanted to use this opportunity to talk about how the preparation might have been and use it as a reflection process of sorts, because it would be a good way to incorporate nostalgia and inspiration at the same time. And that's what I did in the after dinner speech, where I talked about how the preparation was initially and the moments the entire team shared together. For my farewell speech, I would say this was the most difficult one to tackle out of all of them, because I have to talk about one person who is less popular and the other person who is more popular. And I realized that it was very difficult for me to acknowledge the less popular person without giving him a lot of attention. And with my first draft, I realized that it was becoming very difficult to distinguish who was more popular and who was less popular. But after numerous revisions and once I had finalized my speech, I had found a good balance between people acknowledging him but not making him the center of attention, and that is something that I achieved through my technicals. For my story narration, initially I had made a proper script to which I adhered to, and I tried to learn my story narration. But throughout the rehearsals and practice sessions, I realized that I was sounding very artificial and it seemed very robotic and monotonous. So what I did instead was I decided to keep some bullet points in my mind, and I just tried to do the story narration by myself without any particular structure in mind, and that gave it a more natural flow and sound to it as story narration should sound. How do we create balance and variety for the audience? So I would categorize all my speeches into 3 groups, which were formal speeches, semi-formal speeches, and informal speeches. My formal speeches were my introducing and thanking a guest speaker and a persuasive speech. My semi-formal speech was my story narration, and my informal speeches were my after-dinner speech and my farewell speech. Now the reason I have kept these 3 subgroups is because I wanted to show variety in the tone, mood and characters which I would play, so that it doesn't seem very monotonous during the duration of the 25 minutes I was to give the performance. And another way I could provide more variety in my speeches and performance was the way I sequenced my speeches. So you might have noticed that I have kept my formal speech after an informal speech and vice versa, so that there's a constant shift and change in tone and mood throughout my entire performance, and so that I can keep the examiner and the audience constantly engaged. The next question is, how did you create did you do any research to gain a greater understanding of the writer, composer, language or genre? For my persuasive speech, I did extensive research in how nepotism is practiced in 3 sectors, which are the Bollywood industry, Indian politics and corporations. And I did a lot, and I researched specifically into how people are affected by nepotism, either by benefiting from it or by putting at a disadvantage because of it. For my introduction and thanking a guest speaker, for my introduction section, I did a lot of research into Mark Cuban's background and history, and and what he has accomplished as a businessman. And for the thanking portion, I did a lot of research into what his values and beliefs are. And I achieved this by going through numerous talks and speeches of his, which he has delivered as a guest speaker. And I just reiterated and rephrased all what he has mentioned during those talks in my thanking portion. When talking about my story narration, there wasn't a lot of research involved. It was really limited to me reading the short story online and rephrasing that. When talking about my after dinner speech and my farewell speech, as I mentioned before, my research was limited to looking at the speeches by Conan O'Brien and also many after dinner speeches and farewell speeches online. And I try to replicate similar styles and the similar modes which are present in those particular speeches. Moving on to the second portion of the reflection task, which is personal response, challenges and reflection. What skills were needed to approach the challenge? Now, understandably, because this is a public speaking exam, I need to have a public speaking skills to be incredibly proficient. But I realized that over 25 minutes while I was delivering my speeches, I was starting to sound very monotonous and very robotic. And that's when I realized that I wasn't able to completely assume the roles or the characters of the people I was supposed to for the particular speech. And that's when I realized that my acting skills need to be on par as well. What choices of interpretation and or staging did you make? Now, I believe this pertains to my technical skills. Now, when talking about my technical skills, I made sure that I had appropriate backdrops and backgrounds for the speeches and they matched the theme and the mood of the speech as well. And I worked extensively on modifying my sounds. Now, there were a couple of factors I needed to consider while managing my sounds. First one being the intensity of the sounds themselves. Now, if I had a very thunderous applause for a crowd of say 30 people, it wouldn't really match. And same goes for having a very soft and weak applause for say an audience of 1,000 people. So what I'm trying to say is basically I needed to make sure that the intensity of the sounds matched the size and the volume of my audience, because that would really add to my immersion, and this was a very subtle nuance that I needed to consider while making my technical skills. And another thing I needed to consider was timing my sounds correctly and at the right time, and so that they were synchronized with my speeches. Because if they were delayed or played too early, the examiner would pick up on that, and it would break the immersion for him, and he wouldn't really feel as part, like he was a part of the audience. What have you discovered by walking through the challenge? Initially, when I was rehearsing and doing my practice, I realized that it was very difficult for me to get all my speeches and deliver them under the time limit, and I was overshooting by some 30 or 40 seconds. But eventually, through all my practices and rehearsals, I could reduce that time and I'm able to get my speeches under the allotted time. Another thing I realized is that my public speaking skills are to some extent competent and proficient, because I'm able to pace myself correctly for all of my speeches and I'm able to modulate my voice well as well. However, my acting skills aren't really on par, and that was something I really needed to work on. How would you approach a similar challenge again? I would say that I would adopt a similar strategy and method I used this time, where I would finalize and revise all my speeches once and only then start learning, because I realized that when I was revising my speeches and learning them simultaneously, it was a very arduous process of learning and unlearning, learning and unlearning, and that is not something I would really want to put myself through, so I would adopt a similar method which I used this time. What personal strengths or limitations have you noticed in the process? As I mentioned earlier, my acting skills were a bit of a hindrance for me, but over 6 months after incessant practice, it is a hurdle which I have been able to overcome, and something that I'm not really worried about. And my personal strengths have to be my public speaking skills. The third portion of the reflection task is health and safety. First thing being safe practice on stage. Now, as you can see, evidently all my props are spaced far away from each other, and there's not a lot of debris on stage which I could potentially trip over or hurt myself because of. Working with an audience throughout all my practices and rehearsals, the only audience which was present with me was my teacher, Ms. Tracy D'Souza, and she would explain to me where I was making mistakes and where I need to improve on, and I would keep the amendments in mind, and I would deliver my speeches again. Physical and vocal health. Now, this was the first time I would be appearing for an exam which would be 40 minutes long, and I really needed to make sure that I wasn't straining my vocal cords too much. So I drank plenty of water before and after my rehearsals to make sure that I wasn't straining them a lot. And my teacher also demonstrated a breathing exercise which I'm demonstrating now, which was basically breathing in and then humming. Now this was a good way to really massage my vocal cords and really give them some rest. And this is something I incorporated through all of my practices. sustaining focus and energy. Now again, as I mentioned before, this was the first time I would be appearing for a 40-minute exam, and it was really difficult for me to maintain my stamina and not run out of breath in my initial practices. And my teacher and I realized that the only way I could really improve would be by delivering all my speeches on the reflection task all together and going through all the 40 minutes without stopping. And after 6 months of doing that, I would say that I can do it effortlessly now, and it isn't something that I'm really struggling with. This brings me to the end of the reflection task. Thank you.